What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another Three Geeks conversation. Jason and Destiny are joined by Alyson. Alyson, you were in one of my favorite animated shows of all time, which was Beetlejuice, and we'll get into that in a moment.
You mean this girl?
Yeah. But I would like to hear about people's journeys. What was your journey to become an actress / voiceover actress?
Oh goodness, my journey. I was born in the 70s, so a kid in the 80s. Fabulous TV show came out at just the perfect time called Fame. And I was into, I took dance classes, ballet, I think starting from the age of 3 or 4, and piano lessons at the age of 6 and all that stuff. And my parents were just very, even though they both had very sort of office standard paper pushing kind of jobs, lots of bureaucracy with that stuff, but they both absolutely love the arts, have always been strong supporters of all of the arts in different facets. So I was raised with a love of that my entire life. And my mom was involved. One of her hobbies was being involved with the opera company. And they call them supers. Those are like the background extras on stage for the opera. And she would do that. And I remember going to visit her when they were rehearsing a production of Carmen. And everyone was just so nice. It was such a loving, warm environment, completely opposite of what I thought. Like, I was terrified. I was like, oh, I could never do that on stage. Too many people. You have to be like so sure of yourself and like this sort of larger than life personality. And then when you'd see them backstage, they were all just the gentlest, kindest souls. So that's when I kind of caught the bug. And when Claude Watson School for the Arts opened up, and it goes from grade 4 to grade 8, my mom heard about it when we were at my ballet classes one time from the other parents. And we basically heard about it just in time to sign up for the auditions. And I got in for grade 4, and that was it. Because they would get audition calls from producers all over the city, because there weren't a lot of kids that were already professional actors with agents. And that just got everything going. Got an agent, started doing more theater, dinner theater, ended up doing Mr. Dress Up as well, which is a really well-known Canadian kids show, very much like Mr. Rogers. And it wasn't a separate choice to become a voice actor. It was just that Nelvana was based in Toronto. They were doing live action as well as animation at that time. They did a show called Edison Twins, which was a live action show. And I auditioned for that, and I did a bunch of episodes on Edison Twins. And when I was 11, I got a call for Ewoks. Went, auditioned for that. That was my first cartoon. And Nelvana, being this sort of small, very family style run business, sort of, us against the world kind of thing. Once they found people that they liked, whether it was artists or production or actors, whatever it might be, you're on every production.
That's incredible. You mentioned Mr. Dress Up. I actually, even in the States, was able to get that and watched it. Did that kind of lead up to you getting Loonette?
Yeah, one certainly helped the other for sure. So I gotta ask, did you grow up near the Canadian border?
No, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
How did you get Mr. Dress Up?
I'm not sure. I don't know if it was a special channel we had or what we did, but I was able to get it, which I thought was really cool.
I love that. That really makes my heart happy. I had no idea, because I know I have a lot of friends along border cities in the US, and because Toronto is a Canadian border city. Most cities in Canada are border cities. We're all like right along the US border. And we joke about how we all grow up sort of on the one side of the glass looking across and seeing greener pasture, or I wish I got all the shows, or I lived in the great land of Tonawanda. All of my feed came from Buffalo. So there was this magical land of Buffalo that I always wanted to go visit. And my friends in Michigan, same thing. Like they grew up with getting the CBC shows, like which was Mr. Dress Up. So we've had heavy influence in each other's lives. It's why we're very, very close siblings. So it's lovely to hear that it extended that far south. I'm really, really happy. So on Mr. Dress Up, well, another part that also sort of winds in there as well is Follow That Bird and the whole Muppet side of things. Because when I was 10 years old, so one of the first things I did, or within that first year of me getting an agent and becoming a professional kid actor, we did Follow That Bird that summer when I was 10. So that would have been the summer of 1984. And Cheryl Wagner played Miss Finch. Now, I think later on in the movie, some big celebrity dubbed her voice. Whatever. I don't know who that person is, because Cheryl was my Miss Finch, and she was there. She was puppeteering the puppet and doing the voice and everything. Now, she happened to be the mom of a girl that I was very close friends with, Harmony Wagner, and we were going to school together. So I knew Cheryl as Harmony's mom, but I'd never worked with her before. So the first time I got to work with her was on Follow That Bird when I was 10 years old. And Cheryl was part of the Canadian Jim Henson Muppet crew they worked on Fraggle Rock, and they would also work on various Muppet specials, things like the Labyrinth movie, and Dark Crystal. Like a lot of the Muppet people are the same, where when you have really good puppeteers, Jim Henson was very particular, and he liked the same cast and crew. So Cheryl was part of the Canadian side of things. So years later, when we were working together on Mr. Dress Up, and it wasn't that many years later, but it was a handful of years. That was right when she was putting together the concept for Big Comfy Couch. And she was a puppeteer on Mr. Dress Up. She puppeteered Annie, and I think there's another character that she did as well. So we happened to work together, and I had to tell a story in one of the episodes that I was doing. And I remember at lunchtime, she sort of came into the green room, and all of a sudden she was like walking around me in circles, sort of looking me up and down. I'm like, okay, this just got really weird. And she was suddenly picturing me as like a clown in this character that she was just coming up with. So she quickly called in one of the other partners that she was working on the show concept with, Rob Mills. And he and Karen Velo, who was also a puppeteer on Mr. Dress Up, they all sort of sat down with me and had a chat. And then we went to lunch and discussed what this concept was. And I agreed to help them make a demo for the Big Comfy Couch. And that was sort of it. They couldn't get rid of me after that.
You mentioned Follow That Bird. That movie was so sad. I remember watching it as a kid. Like I was 3, I think, when it came out, and I was crying when he turned blue. Like that was the most depressing thing I'd ever seen up to that point. But my question is, what was the voice process like for Beetlejuice? Because you're going into a character established by Winona Ryder, and I know you're still fairly young. Like, do you make a conscious decision to try to emulate her voice, or do something different?
For the audition, I sure did. So I was obsessed with Beetlejuice when it came out. I was in grade 9, so it was just the perfect age. Like everything I wore was black or black and white striped. Very, very much that style. So seeing a character like Lydia on screen for the first time, we had not been represented in that kind of way ever. So it was mind-blowing. The aesthetic was just so rich and fabulous. I went to see that movie with my parents, and my mom had leaned over to me halfway through, and she's like, you better hope Nelvana gets the rights to do this as a cartoon. You should play Lydia. And I was like, yes, message received. That's what I want. And a year later, was it? Yeah, a year later, a year and change. The breakdown goes out. They're doing the Beetlejuice cartoon, and it's Nelvana. So I studied Winona's voice. Like, I really went in and I nailed that. And it was the drier, deadpan kind of, she's sleeping with Prince Valium tonight. Like, it was much more the, I myself am strange and unusual. It was more nasally and more flat and more sort of just kind of in the throat. And I got a callback. The callback was when I was in Florida for March break, nursing a really bad sunburn. Like a really bad sunburn. I couldn't move.
Ooh.
And we're on the phone with my agent. She's like, well, the callback's in 2 days. Can she come back? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, this is my spring break. I had told everybody I'm gone for this. And I was 15. Like, I'm away. I can't do this. So I had to say no. And it was the first time for two things in my life. It was the first time that I had worked really hard to get a part. Like a lot of the other stuff, I felt I either sort of fell into, or it was just like, oh, she's cute and little. So very like commercial. But working to get that Winona voice and land that role, it was the first time that I worked really hard for something like that. And then it was also the first time that I had to say, sorry, I told you that I was going to be away at this time, and my family has to come first. This is the only time, like my mom and dad, they always worked. And so if they got holiday time with me, like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
So in that same sort of the flip of that, working my butt off for the first time and then having to say, no, my priority is my family. And I know I'm right for this. And if you guys know I'm right for this, then you'll wait until I'm back for next week. And that's what ended up happening. They went ahead, they tried to do a demo and it didn't work. So then the following week they brought me in, and I found we have what's called work report sheets. So they're like sign in and sign out sheets. Very simple. It's like this grid, and it says the name of the production on the top, and then it has little categories for you to list the actor's name, the part they're playing, the time in, time out, meal breaks, anything like that. And then you have to initial it once you finish, and the producer initials it as well. I happened to come across the work report from the very first time I was in there with Stephen we met. And it wasn't even when we recorded. It was our like audition rehearsal together.
Wow, that's super cool.
Yeah. I took a photo and I sent it to him, and he was just over the moon. He was like, oh my God, I can't believe you found this. Yeah. So it was, they knew who they wanted, and they knew what clicked. Yeah. And I mean, being in that room with Stephen, once you hear him do the voice, because a lot of it was, I mean, as a 15-year-old, I wasn't really caught up in the whole like, wow, Beetlejuice is actually really, really creepy. And it's really inappropriate that he has this relationship with a teenage girl and he wants to marry her too. Like that never really hit me, you know, as a teenage girl, it just didn't faze me. But as we're going along and we're in that audition session and working together, and the notes are coming back, and they say to me, they're like, so we're going to make Lydia actually younger. And we still want her to have that. She has a slight introvert side to her personality, but not as much as the movie. She's a bit more outgoing. She's just not like the razzle dazzle that you usually see with cartoon characters. So it was finding that in between space where she can still be that poetic, pensive, gothic, love the macabre, but have joy in it.
Yeah.
And have a sense of curiosity and playfulness. She just needs it with her best buddy. She's not that way around everybody. So we worked to find that balance, and they knew they wanted to go slightly younger. And by the end of it, and certainly by the time we recorded the first episode, it was like, don't worry about sounding like Winona Ryder. Pretty much go closer to your own natural voice. So I still just tried to get a little bit of the nasal in there. Just a little bit to give her something different, because I was devastated. I'm like, I worked so hard on this voice. Give me something. So yeah, finding that balance, and that I benefited from being in that rehearsal room with Steven, because he found that balance. I don't know how he did it, but he did. And the only reason I think that the cartoon was successful is because Steven miraculously was able to do that voice, that Beetlejuice voice, and to embody that character, and yet somehow make him innocent and playful and just kind of naive and trustworthy. Not in the sense that he, like, you knew he was always going to screw things up, but you knew he was trustworthy with Lydia.
Yeah.
Like, so it's a combination between phenomenal writing, perfect character design and animation, and then Steven's performance of just marrying all of those sort of juxtaposed things and somehow making them work.
That's incredible. I love that you advocated for yourself that young too. So many people wouldn't have. So that's incredible to hear. Kind of switching gears a little. Claire Redfield kind of became an iconic female character in gaming history. What was it like kind of helping define her personality in those early days of survival horror?
It was weird. It was weird because I didn't know what I was working on. Paul didn't know what we were working on. We'd never played Survivor or survival horror video games. You know, this just wasn't part of our world.
Yeah.
But we both had worked on cartoons, and we both had worked on X-Men. And I think X-Men was really what made the difference for us, because X-Men was unlike any other cartoon. You know, most of us, when we work on cartoons, they're pretty cartoony. You know, a little over the top, a little, you know, just kind of sort of squash and stretch, very zany, a lot of energy. And X-Men was the first one where they hired predominantly theater people. There were a lot of people in the cast that had never done voice work before. They were just really strong, like Shakespearean actors. Alison Seeley-Smith being one of them. So they really went for the gravitas. They wanted very dramatic, serious, real, gritty performances. And that was a bit of a learning curve for those of us who did have animation experience. But once we got it, once we understood it, and once we understood how to deliver that kind of performance just through our voices, that was really a great skill set to have in our arsenal. So when it came time for Resident Evil, Capcom already knew a lot of us from doing the Marvel versus Capcom games. So they wanted that same level of performance for Resident Evil. And it wasn't even called Resident Evil to our faces. They kept it very hidden, and they protected all of their games, and they would write various weird names on the contracts. But when I finally did find out what it was like, oh, now this makes sense. But that didn't happen until the game was coming out. Like during the sessions,
Wow.
it was very isolated. Like we usually just recorded one-on-one because like you're either playing Claire's disc or Leon's disc, and the majority of the stuff is very much isolated.
Yeah.
I think we got to record maybe 2 scenes together, if that. But most of the time they had us do things individually, and Paul and I would just pass each other in the hallway and be like, just kind of gesture like, do you get it? I don't get it. And I remember the one time I said to him, I'm like, I feel like I'm caught in Groundhog Day, because I swear what I just went in to record today, we already recorded. Like we keep recording the same script over and over and over. And he's like, yeah, I don't know. So finally I remember asking, and they were like, oh, this is for a different scenario, depending on the other scenario is basically, and I'm like, I don't know what that means.
You gotta record everything, no matter what option the player chooses.
But back then, it was they basically had to record everything as one thing that would go into the game. They couldn't sort of mix and match. So if when this player is playing and they played the Leon scenario first and they already picked up this gun, when Claire goes back into this scene, that gun isn't going to be there, so it's going to change an interaction with something, and so we have to record the scene its own way with its own filing name, and it's just that she didn't get the gun. In my mind, I'm like, it's the same dialogue. Why are we doing this? But it's because they had to put it all in the game in their own little categories.
Yeah.
So it was weird.
Yeah. Oh, I imagine. We actually hear that a lot when we have people who have voiced over for gaming, that like they really keep every detail under wraps until it's coming out.
Yeah. But it's also, I think, because I didn't have any experience playing the games and certainly didn't know anything about coding for games and game design or anything like that. So from Capcom's standpoint, the people who were there from Capcom, first of all, they mostly just spoke Japanese. There was a translator, but it was, the game designer and director, Kamiya was actually there when we were recording RE2, but he didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't speak a word of Japanese. So for his brain to try to explain to me what's going on when he's so in the moment, it was like they really just wanted to tell me as little as possible that would help me understand, just so that I could do the job. Yeah. And I get it. Like there isn't enough hours in the day to really explain the complexities of game design.
Very true.
And I think in a way it probably helped, because I definitely had that sort of isolated, I don't know what's going on. I feel like a fish out of water. Yeah. That was how I was feeling, and that's what they wanted for Claire anyway. So I guess it kind of worked.
It worked. Voicing Jubilee in X-Men, did you kind of realize how impactful that show and that character would be?
Nope. I had no clue. No clue. Didn't know anything about X-Men. Watching all of these. So I'd met one of the producers and a couple of the writers from Beetlejuice, and they were now, because they work for Fox Kids, and now they were on X-Men. But when we started X-Men, watching this room of like all these guys that came up from the States, from Saban, from Marvel, from Fox, and it's this room full of middle-aged men fighting over their comic books. And that's what it looked like to us. Okay. We're the actors in the studio, and there's this big wall of glass that we can see into the control room. And like 90% of those first few weeks of recording X-Men was just like the feed between would go silent, And we'd be just sitting in the room watching them, like, because we'd do a take and we're like, was that okay? Was that okay? And then it would go silent and you'd watch these guys and just like they're like gesticulating really, vividly. And like it looked like they were going to kill each other. And we're like, this is on comic books, right? Like these are comic book characters. Am I seeing this right? Yeah. And we're all sort of like, what the heck is going on? They were all so passionate and they knew their stuff. Like it was amazing how this property, the people who got it to happen, from Margaret Lesh to Larry Houston to Sydney Iwanter, those folks, they grew up loving X-Men. And so they knew the material and they knew what they wanted to make and they knew what they didn't want to make. So anytime any of us gave a performance that was not that like sort of sophisticated, dramatic vibe, we would just get ripped a new one because they were like, you don't understand. No, this is, it's intense. It's passionate, but it can't be over the top. It's got to be understated at times. So yeah, those were strange days right off the bat. And none of us, except for George Buza, who voices Beast, none of us knew the X-Men comic. But I had a friend who very quickly, when he found out what I was working on, he was like, wait, what? He's like, that comic? I'm obsessed with it. So he just started bringing all of these X-Men comics, and he managed to get some that had Jubilee and Wolverine because she was a fairly new character. She'd been around for like 3 years by that point. So he was just inundating me with these comic books and showing and trying to explain the story and the backstory and the relationship of her and Wolverine. And I was just like, the moment you say comic book, I zone out. That's not how I'm wired, at least back then. But it was fascinating when I saw his reaction to what it was. I was like, oh, so this is a thing that I guess some nerds like you care about. Okay. Well, you're my friend, so I'll care. But then it blew up. We didn't really know that it had blown up because back then, the internet wasn't what it is. So Fox was getting all of these handwritten love letters, fan mail, and none of us ever heard about it. And it wasn't until years later that we started to get a hint of how impactful it was.
Yeah, we talked to George, and he said the same thing, that y'all didn't get any of that fan mail, so
No.
you had no idea.
No.
So like later in life, learning how much it meant to people, like how crazy was that?
It was, so for me, it was a little different just because I had voiced a Chinese American character, and it's, first of all, I didn't know that she was Asian American. You look at the comic and everyone has the same face and same cat eyes, and like for female characters, right? So it was like, is she or isn't she? It was really hard to tell. But I remember when the importance of casting a Black woman to voice Storm, that was really integral to the production company. And then when I found out that Jubilee was Asian American, I'm like, well, what about Jubilee? And everyone's like, shh, just shh. Like, okay. Okay. So years later, it was actually a lot of Asian friends who started to tell me, and other Asian actors who were like, you have no idea how much your performance of Jubilee meant to me. And I'd always start out like by saying, I'm sorry that, that I'm not Asian, and I didn't want to take a work opportunity from somebody. And they're like, no. It doesn't matter. Like having a character on screen, that's what matters. It was the fact that we had this character on screen. So it's been an interesting journey, just sort of navigating that stuff. And yeah, I'm, at the end of the day, I am incredibly grateful that I got to voice her and be part of that incredible. I don't want to say the franchise because there's a lot of stuff about the franchise that I don't like, but that production, the original animated series, I am forever grateful to be part of that.
Well, I think we have about time for one more. So I'm going to kind of loop us back to Loonette. I grew up with Big Comfy Couch. My children have now watched Big Comfy Couch. One of my friends is a dance instructor, and their warm-ups are like the clock stretches. So it was such an impactful show. You got to play that character for nearly a decade. Are there like things that influenced you with that show that kind of still help influence you today?
Yeah. At some point along the way, Loonette and Alyson definitely started to blend into each other. Particularly, like I would say in the early days of Loonette, it was kind of the bossy, bratty side of Alyson that informed the Loonette character. But then somewhere along probably season three and into season 4, once I started doing public appearances as the character, I think Loonette really started to inform Alyson as I was finishing up my teenage years and going into becoming an adult and all of that. And just really starting to understand, certain priorities and responsibilities and I guess empathy. I hadn't had a lot of exposure to kids prior to that. I'm an only child. Didn't grow up with like little ones around me, so they were always sort of like these weird things that you had to care about and feed and although I had cats my entire life, I had no problem doing that with cats, but with children it was like, yeah, no, ew. Like, ew. But then with playing Loonette and then getting to see these little kids and just the love and joy and absolute, like, just the pureness of their love and realizing, oh, okay, no, this is very different. And then very quickly realizing that, oh, kids are great. Kids are fantastic. They've got the curiosity and the love, and they don't have all the snark and the jaded attitude and all the lousy stuff that we sort of adopt in our teenage years and adulthood. Kids are way better than adults. So that transition happened fairly quickly during the first 5 seasons of making Comfy Couch, and it sort of stayed with me. Like, it's definitely Loonette has informed my life going forward ever since being a young adult.
Love that. Speaking of staying with you, did you get to keep the Molly doll?
No. So Molly, it's for people to understand, she's a puppet.
Oh, okay.
So you have to think of her as like this precious sort of prop character item from the show. It's not like I got to keep a shirt that I wore or a pair of shoes on the show. Like, she's a very intrinsic, important part of the show, and very fragile. So I know Boat Rocker, who owns the IP now, they have a Molly doll and they keep her fairly well protected. I think there are a couple others out there somewhere. I'm hoping Cheryl still has one, because we did make a couple over the years, because eventually, like, wear and tear. There's a thing, was it called puppet mange? I remember Fred was telling me about puppet mange, because when inside of a puppet, the sweat from a puppeteer's hand will get in there and then bacteria grows. And you can do your best to try to clean it, but eventually it gets pretty nasty. So there's a lot of things that go into puppet maintenance and care, all of that nutty stuff. So yeah, Molly is very fragile. So I can't see them ever like letting me keep her just because.
Yeah,
too special.
There's been some rumors about a reboot. Have you heard anything about that? Do you know if that's a real thing?
No. Fans, I love the passion of fans, but I think it can also be a bit of an echo chamber.
Yeah.
What I will say is the passion for the show certainly hasn't waned. And because the generation that grew up on it is now having children and their children are growing up on it, there's certainly an appetite for Big Comfy Couch. All of the episodes are out there and available. I don't know if it's Amazon Prime that has it right now. I think it's Amazon Prime. It was on Hulu for a while. And maybe Tubi. But I think Amazon Prime has it. But yeah, as you know, if the appetite is there, we have conversations about content and stuff like that. Like you know, I did the Crocs thing. I don't know if you saw that, but it was just this. It wasn't even to launch a shoe or a new Croc or anything like that. It was simply this putting out something because all of the people in the Crocs like media department grew up loving Big Comfy Couch. So they wanted to do the Croc stretch. So we did that back in August. We filmed me doing the clock stretch on top of a giant croc. So we've been making like little bits of content like that. So who knows? We'll see where that goes. I don't picture a reboot just because that implies certain things that just get kind of messy.
Yeah.
A continuation or an offshoot, I think is probably the way to go.
I'd agree.
Well, Alyson, where can everybody find you online?
Oh boy, don't find me online. I'm I'm an old curmudgeon. I'm on if you want to know what I'm up to or anything like that. There's a professional account. It's Alyson Court Official on Instagram. That's where I try to sort of let people know events and appearances and fun things like that. And then Alyson the Other is my, I'm going to still call it Twitter handle.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody like, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll chat soon.
Thank you.